Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from Masthead Brewing Company out of Cleveland, Ohio. Today's beer is called Coconut Underverse, and it's an Imperial Stout that clocks in at 13.1% ABV. This one is bourbon barrel aged, and it is a coffee Imperial that also has added coconut. So a big beer here. We've done a few beers from Masthead, though it's definitely been a while, so I'm anxious to jump back into another one. And we'll start with label art. Nothing really of note. It's just a very clean label design, kind of a purplish gray gradient with the main points of the branding up top in gold foil. This is wax dipped, kind of a white wax. So as always, we'll take the pointy, trusty end of our bottle opener here, and we're just going to start to score right underneath the edge of the cap. All right, so this is actually very thick wax on here. This could take a minute. So yeah. Due to the magic of video editing, I'm not going to make you sit through and suffer. We'll do a quick cut and jump to when I actually get through this wax. Okay, so that didn't take too long. It took about 15 seconds. This is very thick, but it came off in nice, clean one piece. So we've got access straight to that cap. And we're going to get this poured down right into our old trusty stout glass. Very dark, very thick as this pours. I'm going to intentionally give it a bit of aggression to give it the best chance to form a nice head here that it possibly can. Yeah, always splashes all over my table. That's fine. We can clean it up. But let's start with the color. Yeah, absolutely pitch black, as you'd expect on a 13.1% ABV beer. The other thing I can tell you is this has a very pungent aroma. As soon as I started pouring it in the glass, I could pick it up. And now as I'm holding it, 2 feet away from my face, it is just pungent. It is absolutely whacking me right in the nose. It smells fantastic. So let's get right up over this. Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, very big aroma on this one. Big nose. You get plenty of that bourbon barrel. Comes through very clearly. Smells distinctly bourbon-like. Gets some of those kind of caramelized sugar and vanilla notes coming off of it. The coconut you can pick up as well, and you can really smell the nice roasty underpinning of the malt bill that is the base of this beer. So basically everything that they did to it, everything this beer is about, you can get in the nose, and it's hugely pungent. So head has settled down a bit. We got a nice little pad floating on top, good bit of cling. Let's just jump right in, see what this one's about. Oh yeah, that's a big beer. It's a heavy beer. It looked thick when I was pouring it, and I can tell you it feels thick. This has a lot of weight to it, a ton of presence, and a boatload of resistance on the mouthfeel. I mean, it's big time. 13.1% ABV, I expected it, but you don't always get it even though you expect it. This one delivers exactly what you would expect it would. Massive aromas, a huge heavy body, and a very resistant mouthfeel. It's absolutely lovely. In terms of the flavor profile, the first thing I noticed when I swallowed was actually not the bourbon. It was the roasty underpinning of the malt bill. So this is a stout, of course, a big Imperial Stout, and it's got an underpinning malt bill plus coffee added that really is kind of the whole story of this beer. The bourbon barrel, very clear as well on the flavor profile, but it's an added bonus, much like the coffee is. So the first thing that I did get was this very rich roasty underpinning, very earthy, and there's a ton of underlying cacao and a little bits of char. And the coffee comes through behind that, and they start blending together. And it's tastes to me kind of like a medium dark roast type blend. I don't know the exact roast that they use on the coffee, but that's what it tastes like. And that could, of course, be coming partially from the coffee itself, and it certainly could be coming from this rich, deep malt bill that they used in the beer. The next thing I could say is that the whiskey on this, the bourbon, very distinctly bourbon. It's got this nice spirit-like quality to it up front. You immediately know, oh, this is a nice bourbon barrel-aged beer. If you didn't read the label, if somebody blind gave you this, you would immediately know it right away. Oh, bourbon barrel. It's very nice. There's a lot of kind of caramelized sugar sense to it, a good bit of notes of molasses as well as that kind of classic vanilla kick that you often get bourbon. So this all just really works beautifully together. The other thing that I want to point out in the flavor, we've talked about this many times on this channel. Coconut is one of my favorite ingredients in a beer, especially a darker beer. And done right, it's absolutely fantastic. But it is one of those trickier ingredients with which to brew because it can very quickly take these weird off kind of funky flavors if it's not done just right, in the right amount, in the right part of the process. Whatever they did to this, it's absolutely beautiful. The coconut really comes through clearly as coconut. There's no weird funkiness to this beer at all. It just tastes right. So big, bold beer, a lot of layering, a lot of information to process on the palate. As always, we will jump back in for a second sip, let everything re-intensify, pick it apart again, make sure I didn't miss anything. Then we will talk about the balance and the finish. But on first sip, a very, very well done Imperial Stout. Take two. Big roasty malt bill underpinning. On second sip, that coffee is even more forward. It's a very deep, dark roast. It's a little hard to say if what I'm getting is these really kind of earthy, roasty underpinnings is entirely from the malt bill. My guess could be wrong on the type of roast. I said a medium dark. This could be leaning stronger into a proper dark roast on this coffee. It's very forward. It's an intensity of coffee flavor, and it's very rich and earthy, and there's some underlying natural bitters coming out of this. So again, it could be coming from the coffee, it could be coming from the malt bill, or a combination of the two, but it's bold, it's pungent, it's in your face. Not a sweet beer, of course, and there is a good bit of bittering, and it really does come directly from this malt bill and the coffee. The coconut kicks in roughly 3 seconds after that initial burst of intensity of the malts and the coffee back off a bit. The coconut starts to open up, and it comes in tandem with the whiskey barrel side of things. That undercurrent of molasses, those caramelized sugars, that slight vanilla, and it binds. And that barrel really, really does a good job of binding with the coconut in particular. That's the two flavors I can kind of pick out together, and then they have all their nuance, and it's the coffee kind of binding with the malt bill. And of course, you get a lot of interplay. If we were looking this as like waves, they would be, one coming up, coming back up, overlapping, intersecting with one another on multiple points. It's just a very well put together stout. Very, very nice. In terms of the balance, if I had anything to say that could even be remotely taken as a criticism, I would say probably a bit more coconut nuance would be nice in this beer. Even though you can pick it out, it is a lot more subtle compared to the coffee, the roasty underpinning of the malt bill, and the bourbon. Those are all three big, bold, intense flavors and flavor profiles. The coconut is there, but it is dialed back a lot more subtly. Now, maybe their thought process was the same as I've explained many, many times. Oh, if we go overboard with this coconut, it could start getting funky, and we don't want that. Perhaps, I don't know. But if you could take anything as a criticism, I would like a little bit more presence on the palate from the coconut without having to really dig deep and work hard, thinking about what it is you're tasting on the palate to pick it out. It would be nice to get that same immediate clarity that you get from the malts and the coffee and from the bourbon. But it's still delicious. So balance, yeah. Overall, I think it's great. Maybe a bit more coconut. In terms of the finish, this is a bourbon barrel-aged Imperial Stout. It's got some big roasty malts, some big roasty coffee underneath it, and it is 13.1% ABV. So you would expect the finish to be quite long and quite wet. Wet it is, longer than average it is, but it's not as long as I anticipated. And really, I think on this one, what is keeping it from being in that group with the upper echelon length on each end of the finish, kind of barrel-aged Imperial Stouts, it's the overall intensity of the barrel. It doesn't lack intensity on this beer, but it's not as bold and in your face as it is on others. So really, this comes down to a product of the balance decision that they made. It's very easy to overdo a barrel-aged stout, particularly bourbon barrel-aged stouts, if you leave them in the barrels for too long. Everything has a really clear voice, asterisk with the coconut. Yes, it still has a clear voice, but strictly balance and how it interrelates to the finish. If they had left it in longer, it would definitely be driving the length of the finish out longer, but it would have a direct impact on the underlying balance of this beer itself. So there are slight trade-offs. Definitely longer than average, but not as long as others. Overall, a very well put together stout, a really, really big one, and I am a big fan. There's a lot of subtlety to this one that you don't often get in these big barrel-aged stouts, especially that have other added ingredients, and they've done a great job. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, come with my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Masthead Brewing Company's Coffee Coconut Underverse, a bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout brewed with coffee and coconut. This one clocked in at 13.1% ABV. Masthead Brewing is based in Cleveland, Ohio. So this was a very nice beer. There's a lot of big barrel-aged stouts out there, a lot of non-barrel-aged versions, and both coffee and coconut are pretty common ingredients. So this one was one of those that I thought was done very, very well. Really great balance overall. And frankly, for me, what kind of set this one apart was kind of that coconut in particular. There were elements about it I really, really liked, and elements that I would have liked a bit more. So we're just going to jump right in and go through the scores. Starting with the aroma on this was absolutely huge. You could smell that barrel quite clearly. You could smell the coconut quite clearly. You could smell the underpinning of the roasty malt bill and the coffee. Nothing I could say about it other than big, bold, pungent, and wonderful. The aroma gets a 10 out of 10. For the taste, overall, I thought the taste on this was fantastic. This was just a well done stout. Everything kind of had its part to play, and I didn't really find myself lacking for anything in the taste. And I got to pick out everything they added to it. Certainly there were some balance tweaks that I would have done personally, but in the grand scheme, I really liked the whole package as it worked together in this beer. The taste, I also gave a 10 out of 10. For the body on this was absolutely huge, exactly as expected for this beer style in this ABV range. Body gets a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel really was kind of the same story with the body. It had a boatload of resistance. Way more than you would normally expect to find in an Imperial Stout. Granted, this one is quite high ABV, 13.1, but it met my expectations fully. Mouthfeel also gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was above average to be certain, but it wasn't as long as I expected, given the overall ABV range of the beer, what they did with it. And yeah, there were even some nice undercurrents of bitters. But frankly, it really came down to the relative subtlety of the barrel aging that they used. Yes, it was present both in the aroma and in the flavor profile, but it wasn't one of those where it felt like they let it age for like a year or a year and a half. Yes, the barrel did its job, but it didn't stick around with that same intensity that you often find in these big barrel-aged stouts, and that did hold the finish back from extending as long as some in kind of the upper echelon range for this ABV, but it was above average. The finish, I gave a 7 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did okay. It formed pretty well at the beginning, and it stuck around maybe just a tick longer than you would expect for the average, so it really was on the high end of average, and I rated it as thus. The head and the retention, I did give a 6 out of 10. For the appearance, pitch black as expected, it gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance, this was kind of the key category for me. Overall, I thought the balance was fantastic, but I did find myself just wanting a bit more presence from the coconut. Now, I come back to they could have done that, for any myriad reasons, but overall the balance I thought was exceptional, but I would have liked just a bit more presence from the coconut to come through. It was the most subtle of all the aspects of this beer, but in general, I thought it was great. I only docked 1 point here. The balance gets a 9 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, subjectively, I really, really liked this one. I thought they did a great job. A great barrel-aged coffee stout with coconut that didn't taste funky. I gave it a 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style. Overall, this beer did very, very well. Only lost a few points in a few categories, nothing super key, but it did miss getting perfect marks in a few, but in the grand scheme, it was a great beer. I only docked 1 point here as an example of the style. Does get a 9 out of 10. So the total score on Masthead Brewing Company's Coffee Coconut Underverse is a 91 out of 100. So well above average, guys. That's to be certain. This was an extremely well put together beer. Like I said, with the coconut in particular, not going too heavily, getting it exactly right to not put those funky flavors, those off flavors and aromas in this beer. Job well done. Personally, I would have liked a little more presence from the coconut, but you know, maybe they had to do it to dial it back to keep it from getting funky. That's at least kind of my theory on this one. Obviously, I don't know. But overall, very, very well done. If you like these big, flavor-forward, aroma, impactful, big body, full, round Imperial Stouts, this is one I would definitely keep on the radar. It was barrel-aged, coffee, and the added coconut was a wonderful bonus. Overall, this beer was extremely well done. Just another great big beer from Masthead. If you're a big stout fan, this is one I do highly recommend. I did get mine from Tavour if you want to check and see if they have any more coming out soon. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit the bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.